Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Sig Daddy's Wrestling Show. I'm your host, Skylar Sig Daddy Sigmund. My guest today is an award-winning photographer, the founder of Wrestleville, and the author of Lance by Chance Wrestling as a Von Erich, and the newly released Wrestleville, the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1. Vinny Barry joining me on the show today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join me.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
And firstly, I have to commend you on both books. Very good pieces that were super enjoyable and really easy reads.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
And so, I wanted to get started off with what did your journey look like before creating the website?
Well, before I had created the website, I was writing for a lot of boxing and MMA websites, and I was covering boxing and MMA down here in South Texas. And there for, I don't know, maybe about 2015, 16, it just kind of dried up a little bit. And I wasn't participating in writing for, that sport here. And so I kind of wanted to write about something. So that was why I started the Wrestleville website.
And so, when did your love for pro wrestling begin?
I discovered professional wrestling, I guess, in the early 80s when I was living in the Dallas area. Of course, world-class championship wrestling was what I grew up on, and that was, part of the reason why I wanted to write the book about Lance Von Erich and the Von Erichs.
Oh, okay. And so I kind of learned from your second book in the preface of the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1 that you were secretly writing the Lance by Chance book when Kenny Casanova, who's authored many other wrestling biographies, including the late Vader and Kamala's books, asked you to work on a project for him, and you kayfabed him.
Well, I think the real story behind that was I've thought about writing a book all my life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm 52 and I'm just now doing it. And so I really didn't know how to go about writing it, and so I didn't really want to make it publicly known that, just in case if it never saw the light of day, I didn't want it,
all its hype around it, right?
Say that again.
Like all this hype around it, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And also too, it was, to me, I thought, one of the best kept secrets in wrestling too. And so I kind of felt like there was other people that probably wanted to write about it as well,
Yeah, and what that brings me to is it must have been a crazy process trying to get in contact with Lance Vaughn. I would feel like, because he seemed to be a very busy guy from what as I read your book. How were you able to find him? How receptive was he to the idea of a biography?
Well, that was, what? I think I caught him at the right time, the right time in his life. And, I was talking to James Beard, and I was interviewing James Beard. I was writing a little story on him. And, I talked to him a couple different times, and Lance Von Erich came up and in our conversation. And I was just always like, what an interesting story that is, and what an interesting person that would be to write about. And I just thought I was going to write something, a short little story on my website. And I did that. But when I first reached out to him, well, James Beard told me how to get in touch with him. And so when I reached out to him, his first thought and reaction was, well, why do you want to do this? And why would anybody want to read this story? And I said, well, I think people would find it very interesting. That story got the most hits that I ever had on my website, and he was impressed with the story. And I had told him, I said, look, if you ever consider writing a book, just consider me. I'd reached out to Buddy Landell right before he died.
Mm-hmm.
Because I heard him on a podcast and he had said that nobody reached out to him about writing a book. So I reached out to Buddy Landell, and then he died within, I don't know, a couple months, very soon after I reached out to him. So I felt like I was ready. And when I asked Lance, that, hey, if you consider doing it, consider me. And he said, write the book.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, I did, but the process was long because, he lives in Mexico and we would have to pick a certain time. And I called him almost every Sunday for months. I can't tell you how long it was, but it was a while.
And so, like, with that being said, that led me into my next question. How long was the process in writing this book and then getting to the published date?
It was about 3.5 years.
Oh my, it was a long process.
Yeah, that was a long process. And then after I had interviewed him and I had all this information, I really didn't know how I was going to tell the story. And it probably took me a few months before I, kind of worked on getting it to come out and to fit and to flow. And yeah, it was a challenge. There's no doubt about that.
And so what I got from Lance's book, you and Lance's book, it was interesting because I didn't know a whole lot about the Von Erichs outside of the tragedy and watched the Dark Side Ring episode about them. I didn't know about this other Von Erich, Lance. And then what I learned from this book is there's so much more than meets the eye with him. If you didn't know, like, there's a lot of people probably just didn't know. They just thought he was a failed wrestler in world-class championship wrestling. But this guy did a lot of different things. So, like, real estate, having success wrestling in South Africa. His wrestling career didn't end right after he left world class, as well as doing the gym business and then the timeshare business now I think he said in the resort industry as well.
Right. Yeah. And you know what's so interesting is that, hardcore Von Erich fans just want to kind of, forget about that, that era, like that was just like the black eye on, but, you got to remember, for one thing, Fritz brought him in because David Von Erich died because of the tragedies, and then kind of really put the rocket on him because of Mike was sick as well. And so, you had this guy who wasn't really a Von Erich, but I mean, really took on the duties of being a Von Erich because, there was a particular time where he was the only Von Erich wrestling, and for several months, and a lot of people forget that, but I lived there and I saw it, and I remember I was like, hey, Lance is the only Von Erich. I think a lot of people, I mean, look, if the Von Erich said this guy was purple, they believed him, right? Mm-hmm. But now everyone's like, well, I knew he wasn't really a Von Erich. I don't think you did, because we all were drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And back then, it wasn't uncommon for people to do that in wrestling, I mean, there's a lot of people that aren't related and they say they're related, but on this case, for Lance, it's like nobody was going to stand for it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was kind of like, I don't know, like part of that Von Erich legacy that nobody wants to remember.
And I was seeing like stuff, like when I remember reading stuff with Lance is that like the Von Erichs like no-showed stuff a lot, it seemed like.
Yeah, they did. And it was, you know, Lance describes it as, well, he didn't know if they were doing it because they felt like they could get away with it because it was their dad's company, or maybe because they were partying too much, you know?
And it seemed like from what I gathered, it seemed like the best relationship that Lance had with any of the Von Erichs was seemed like Carrie.
Right. Yeah. Well, they both had like the same, you know, physical working out at work ethic in that regard. You know, they both had bodybuilding bodies, and you know, they Kerry was such an easygoing, you know, guy, you know, is he had this outgoing personality, and the way that Lance described it was like Kevin was a little more rigid like his dad, you know, it was, and Fritz was a little intimidating. A lot of people didn't like to approach Fritz, you know, because he was kind of gruff and stuff, and Kevin kind of had that, I don't know, maybe that personality a little bit more like his dad, but Kerry was, you know, happy-go-lucky and easygoing, and you know, he liked to make people laugh, and he was a good guy, you know, he was an easy guy to talk to.
And like through in this book, Lance by Chance, there was one story in here that I absolutely loved, and I didn't want to dive in too far into the book other than just this one little story. How fun was it to write that part of the bike journey in Africa, that long bike journey?
Yeah, it was fun, you know, and Lance Lance and his friends, you know, Lance is an extremist, you know, I mean, he would do, you know, things that most people wouldn't do, and they got this idea, him and his friends, why don't we ride our bikes to the Republic of Congo? And you know, the Republic of Congo was, I can't remember the exact miles, but they drove from where they lived in South Africa to the, what was it, the border of Zimbabwe.
It was like 800. I think it was like 800 miles or something like that.
Right. And then yeah, and then they did 800 miles on their bikes, and um yeah, they had a lot of adventures on there, you know, and he discusses it in the book, some of the things that they had to eat, some of the things that they had to endure and put up with. You know, sometimes they would ride on top of a bus, you know, you know, to take a break, and they were apprehended by, or I guess they encountered little kids that would, you know, in some of these rural places of Zimbabwe or Zaire, they come across these kids who had these machine guns, and they would like, give us your money, give us your money, and you know, they came up with a way to, you know, not give them their money.
Yeah. And I think there was a portion where they were getting chased by an elephant in there too, as well.
That's right. That's right.
Oh man, that had to be frightening to say the least. So, looking at the so writing about Lance, what was the most interesting you learned about him in the process of writing the book?
Well, Lance is pretty much an open book. I mean, that guy was, you know, for someone who is as private as he is, and let me tell you, he is private. There's, you know, if you notice in the book, he talks a lot about himself, but he talks a lot about the wrestling and things he did. You know, he doesn't talk about his family, or there's some things that he just wasn't going to talk about. And he says it doesn't need to be in the book. It doesn't need. So he was private, but he was honest to a fault. And I say that because there'd be some things like, at the time I was talking to this English teacher, and she was like, well, you gotta, really describe the detail and get detail. So I was like, well, what color was it? And how big was it? And what did it look like? And I'd get all this detail
Yeah.
from him, right? And when I'd ask him questions like that, he'd say, well, hey, wait, whoa, you're not going to write about that, are you? And I said, well, yeah, I was going to. And he goes, no, don't write about that. And I said, oh, okay. And then we get to another part of the story and something else. And I said, oh, so I suppose you don't want me to write about this either. He goes, no, I don't care. Write about that. Put it in the book. And I was like, dude, if I were you, I would tell the other story and not tell this one. It was,
it's kind of interesting how he's so private at the same time he's so open about other things. It's kind of,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there was some things I could not pry out of him, and then there's some things that I was like, dude, let's tone that down a little bit,
It's almost too descriptive.
Yeah, exactly.
And moving over to your latest book, the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1, the style of the Pro Wrestling Vault is much like your website, Wrestleville.com. It's very unique and unlike really anything I've read personally. And in it, we get a really good mix of like short stories. It almost seemed like they were like mini biographies on many wrestlers we know, some of which are journeymen and others were currently on the rise, and some of them legends. Was that your goal coming into it, to get that kind of mix, or was that kind of just happened as you were putting the book together?
Well, as I was reaching, when I was initially writing the stories, I was just reaching out to wrestlers on the scene, and I didn't know if, I didn't know who I was going to get. I mean, when I interviewed Harley Race, I didn't know that was going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty excited about that, but as I was moving on, I guess the answer to your question is, I wanted to write about a different, I didn't want to hit all legends, because there's a lot of people rising up and a lot of people that grinding it out that haven't got the exposure that maybe they deserve. And I wanted to kind of shine that spotlight on those people. I wanted to tell these stories. There's some people in that book that have been wrestling for 20 years and never broke that, that
proverbial glass ceiling or whatever they call it.
Right.
And I thought it was a really cool mix. You get to learn about people, about professional wrestlers that, like you said, have been around for quite a long time, but like have not broken through that glass ceiling. Some people I didn't know about. It was cool to learn about those people, as well as the legends and other wrestlers on the rise as well.
Yeah, and that was the whole thing about when I was starting to write about wrestling. Was I wanted to tell stories, right? But I wanted to tell stories that, maybe some people weren't, aware of, and I wanted to tell stories of people who nobody heard of, and when I found Mike Rapata, I thought Mike Rapata was such a good story to write about, because here he held the NWA World Heavyweight title twice. He had the same belt that Ric Flair held, but a lot of people don't know Mike Rapata, because Mike Rapata wrestled in 2000, in late 90s, early 2000s, and that's when he was champion, and the NWA wasn't what it was when Ric Flair was the champion. And so, I thought that was important to get his story out, to tell that story,
Another one in there, I like, it was the last one of the book, which was Sir Mo, which was quite interesting. I'd never known what about what he and Mabel, or Viscera, people would know him as from the WWE. I did not know what, like, that story of them and him being a inspirational speaker now.
Yeah, he has SOAR Championship Wrestling in Dallas, and I went up there last summer, and he really does spend a lot of time with the youth. There's I met a young man up there. He's probably, I think he was about 14, and he came over to my table where I was selling books, and I had the Pro Wrestling Vault wasn't out yet, but I did have like a prototype, like a sample of. I was taking pre-orders, and you could go through it. It was about 50 pages, but it gave an idea of what was going to be in the book. And this young man came over and he picked it up, and he was talking about the book, and I said, "Hey, Sir Mo's in that book. Do you know who Sir Mo is?" And he goes, "Man, he trains me in wrestling."
Well, that's awesome.
And so he works with all ages, and so, but what he does is he teaches these kids that, there is a better way than, causing trouble or, not being responsible. There is a better way of, buckling down in school and staying out of trouble and doing something productive and being active in your community, and that's what he's teaching these young people.
And like he was talking about how he didn't grow up with like a father figure because his father wasn't present, which that was pretty inspirational too as well. Like
Right.
because he wanted to use that as motivation to talk to other kids and help other kids who may have had that kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what he did for Mabel. When he met Mabel was in a lot of trouble, and his real name's Nelson. Mabel's name is, and he was in a lot of trouble, and his dad didn't know what else to do with him, and they met Bobby Horn at the wrestling school where he was training, and that day when they were introduced to each other, Bobby Horn told Nelson's dad that, you know what, I'll be a mentor to him. I'll be a positive influence on your son, because he wanted to train, and they lived far away. And so I believe that Mabel moved in with Bobby.
Yeah, he did.
And that's how they became, a partnership.
It was just super cool to read that. I did not know about that with them and the Men on the Mission. I knew about that group, but that was super cool to learn about Sir Mo. So a lot of the book is NWA based and out of the South and Southwest United States. So like you said, you were world-class championship wrestling. You kind of grew up on that kind of stuff. Did you follow the NWA as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And how that theme came in the book was my friend John Paul LeBlanc, who supplied most of the pictures, and there's about 400 pictures in that book.
A lot of great ones.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he's very takes a lot of pride in his work, and he covers the Gulf Coast region of the United States. He's from New Orleans, but he'll go to Alabama, Mississippi. Was in Florida last night, and he covers that whole southeastern part of the United States. And he had so many pictures, and he has a lot of like what we would call like promo pictures, right? Like the champions with the belt and stuff like that. And he had so many NWA champions, and that's why I wanted to put them throughout the book, was to kind of mark that era, to bring back memories of like, oh, I remember that champion. I remember Jazz, or I remember Rob Conway when he was champion and stuff like that.
And like Adam Pearce as well too.
And Adam Pearce. Yeah. And yeah, I liked Adam Pearce. I thought for the era that he was world champion, I thought he was amazing. And he kind of missed the golden age, right? Or the era that was publicized, and he grinded it out.
Yeah, he was a little bit like he was just right before that era where it started to come back again, it seemed like.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, he's doing well for himself now in WWE too, as an authority figure.
Well, he's very talented and very knowledgeable wrestler. I mean, the guy knows the business inside and out, and you can see where he is today. He is, using what he knows to help the sport.
And he certainly is. So we look at the book. Actually, I just want to do a fun little question. Who are some of your favorite wrestlers growing up? Since you kind of grew up with world class championship wrestling.
Well, I liked Kerry Von Erich, and I liked Ric Flair. I loved Eddie Gilbert, and I thought he was amazing mind for the business. Golly, Harley Race. I liked Harley Race. Those are some of the ones off the top of my head. But yeah, I like the Von Erichs. I liked, because I lived in Dallas. I mean, that was kind of what I grew up on.
Mm-hmm. And they were an institution. The Von Erichs were there in Dallas.
My goodness.
And it was worldwide too, because they got the Christian Broadcasting Network out in what was it? Out in the Middle East, even it was Israel.
Yes,
that's wild.
Yeah, and there's some really good stories of them going to Israel in there, and I think there's a lot of people are surprised when you talk about that book. I was talking to somebody, and when I was on another podcast, and one of the guys that was on the show, they were asking me about the Lance book, and he was really surprised about what we were talking about. And he goes, well, I thought it was about Lance. And I said, well, it is about Lance, but it's also about what happened in world class when he was there. And he, they brought him in, right? They discovered him right after David Von Erich died. They sent him up to Portland. They brought him down in October of '85, and he wrestled. Gino Hernandez died shortly after. They went to Israel. Kerry had his motorcycle accident. There's a lot of stuff that happened in that short period of time when he was there. And that, I think that's what makes the story so intriguing, because he touches on all that stuff, and he talks about his friendship with Bruce Brody, and he talks about, Chris Adams and what happened in Israel. And, the incident where Chris Adams had butted the pilot on the plane, all that's in the book, and a lot of people are surprised, but, he was there, and that's why, the story is so good.
Certainly it is. It's lots of great little stories placed in Lance by Chance. And moving back over to the Pro Wrestling Vault, the stories we get in the book kind of range from April 2017 to March 2018, which saw the end of Bruce Tharpe's run as the owner of the NWA, and then Corgan taking over, Billy Corgan, the frontman for Smashing Pumpkins, taking over in October of 2017, if I'm correct. Did you see any major changes between Tharpe's NWA and Corgan's NWA?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even on a regional level?
Yeah, well, the NWA you could find, down here, regular, it was, they had shows in San Antonio or even in Brownsville, and, but when Billy Corgan took over, it was kind of stationary, it wasn't like, it didn't travel like it was, but they had like 20 different promotions that were represented by the NWA or represented the NWA, however you want to say it. But when Billy Corgan took over, he put a stop to all that, that these little promotions across the United States were no longer to be affiliated with the NWA, and that hurt a lot of these businesses because of the NWA being such a known entity, and then it kind of took away a little bit of a luster from these smaller promotions that were running in these places. Some of them continue to do well, but some of them, I'm sure it hurt their businesses a lot.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the effect of that transition. Like it pretty much it hurt a lot of the regional smaller ones. And is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I knew some promoters that were really upset that they could no longer use the NWA name. And I said, yeah, but you got such a good product, you know? And he goes, yeah, but I mean, the name is been around for 50 years, you know, and it means something. So that was the one thing. One thing I like to say about the books, you know, the Lance Von Erich is an autobiography, and then the Pro Wrestling Vault is short story. So it's a different book, you know. I mean, it definitely has a different feel to it, but I'm really proud of it because you can pick it up and you don't have to commit yourself to the whole thing right away. But it's one of those books that it's hard to put down.
No,
You
it
know?
certainly is.
Yeah.
I didn't put it down. I think finished the book out. I think I had about 30, 40 pages, well, 50 pages left. I cranked it out in 2 hours today. It was such a easy read, and it was so nice.
Yeah, and then when you get tired of reading, you can just go through the pictures, and then you know there's so many pictures in there. When you flip back and you go back and say, oh, I don't remember seeing this one. You know, I mean,
And you see some certain like even bigger names in there. I saw a picture in there of AJ Styles, who's a huge star in
right?
WWE now.
Absolutely. And there's a picture in there of Keith Lee too. And you know, a lot of people you know, been through the independent scene. And you know, another thing why I like that book is, you know, it celebrates wrestling. You know, it gives some exposure to the people that haven't had a lot of exposure. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're reminded of some of these veteran wrestlers, you know, guys like C.W. Anderson, Damian Wayne, Harley Race, Larry Henning, Bill Dundee, you know, Bushwhacker Luke. You know, you get these guys that have really cemented their name. And, you know, it's such a mix of good stuff that, you know, wrestling fans from all over, you know, a lot of people, oh, it's Gulf Coast heavy. Well, the pictures were taken in the Gulf Coast region of the United States, but the stories are wide range from all over the country, you know.
Yeah, it's certainly that's the case. And like, even if you don't want to sit down and read like the whole book, but you can pick out any story you want to read in the book at any time, and you can get your enjoyment out of that as well.
Sure.
It's like that. Just you could pick out what the Harley Race story or the Bill Dundee story or one of each. Like you could pick out one and read at one time, and then I think Kenny Casanova said it was he said a little funny thing in the forward or that it's like, oh, you could read this on the crapper.
Right. Yeah. And somebody was saying was you know that I guess he rides the bus to school or to work or something, and he was like, man, I think it's great that, you know, you could read 2 or 3 stories and then get off and go to work and then come back. And you know, so yeah, it's convenient too.
And so you mentioned one of the names, Bushwhacker Luke, in the book, and some of the names in the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 1, like incredibly legendary. Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express, the late Harley Race, Bushwhacker Luke, Tracy Smothers, among many others. Is there a story of someone in particular in the book that you got like extra enjoyment out of writing? Because it had to be exciting to talk to and tell stories of these wrestling legends.
I loved everything about this book, you know, to putting this thing together. I mean, I learned so much about these people by doing this, you know. I could sit here and think of something, you know, but you know, there was so many interesting things that just really amazed me, you know. I like the story of Sir Mo. I didn't know that either, you know, how he met Nelson and his, you know, growing up without a father. And and knowing that that was important to help other people. You know, I didn't know that part. You know, Tracy Smothers, I've talked to many wrestlers. Chris Michaels talks about it in this book, but I interviewed Jeremiah Plunkett recently, and he said the same thing about Tracy Smothers, that, you know, that he would go out of his way to help these people grow, you know, go out of his way to, you know, pass the business of professional wrestling, and, you know, spend a lot of time with people, helping them just be better, you know. And to hear, you know, several people tell you that, you know, wow, you get a pretty good idea of who he was as a person, and how much he loved wrestling. And there's a story in there about Harley Race. You know, his brother and his father took him to a wrestling match. He wanted to train so bad. He was about 14, 15 years old. And, you know, his parents were like, hey, go to school, get your school done. And then he went to school and punched his principal in the face, and he got kicked out of school. And so, can I wrestle now?
It was such an interesting way to get involved in wrestling. He was doing everything possible to get into professional wrestling because he loved it so much.
Right. Yeah. And you know, I've shared this story a couple times, but, you know, I called him up. I interviewed Larry Henning first, and I was interviewing them for the tag team induction for the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And after I talked to Larry Henning, he said, well, what did Harley say? And I said, well, I haven't talked to Harley. He goes, are you going to call Harley? I said, I don't have Harley's number. He goes, well, give me a minute and I'll get it. So he gave me his number. I called Harley, told him what I was going to do. He talked to me for about 40 minutes.
Wow.
Told me to call the next day at his gym to ask for somebody, and he'd email me a picture. So I did that. But when I called the next day, Harley answered, and we talked for another hour and a half.
Oh my goodness.
And that's how I got the story of him, how he went to the wrestling show and punched his principal. And, you know, he told me all that stuff. And he just loved talking about wrestling, you know, and he just, you know, was, you know, it was his life.
And you could just, there's probably so many different stories you pulled out of him in that, hour, 40 minutes that you talked to him.
Right.
And it kind of almost had to be mind-blowing to be talking to Harley Race. It's like, with the guy of his stature too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was one of the guys where I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to him. Bushwhacker Luke was one. C.W. Anderson, I was, you know, like, wow, you know, I was kind of surprised I was talking to him. But all these guys were just so generous with their time, and just really easy guys to talk to, you know.
So what have you enjoyed most about the process of writing the books? Because it had to be fun to get to tell the stories of all these wrestlers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just telling the stories, you know, I've been in, I mean, I'm a videographer. I've worked for news and, you know, news companies, and I've you know, written for some newspapers. I mean, you know, telling stories and explaining things is something I've been kind of doing most of my adult life, you know. And so, you know, being able to do it about something that I'm so passionate about, and something that I really enjoy writing about, it's a great thrill for me, you know. And then when people read the material and they enjoy it, there's a great deal of satisfaction that comes along with that, you know.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. And you can find both of these books. I have them sitting here right here with me. Putting them up to the camera a little bit closer. You can find the Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 1, and Lance by Chance at lancebychance.com. Is there anything else you would like to add, Vinny?
Yeah, well, and also too, you can, if you're on the Wrestleville website, there's a link that'll take you to the Lance by Chance wrestling store where you can buy the books. But yeah, I think fans and readers are going to enjoy both these stories. Again, I'm really pleased with the outcome of the Pro Wrestling Vault, because what I think is neat about it is how it kind of ties in. You know, when you start reading these stories, and how one story kind of ties in maybe a couple of chapters down the road, and it was like Ricky Morton's and Chase Owens story kind of did
Yeah.
that. Barrett Brown and Mr. USA and Eric Andrews story kind of did that.
I think it
Tracy
was
Smothers and Chris Michaels, things like that. It just and it continued too, like even with Tim Storm and Bruce Thorpe, and it just how it just kind of all went full circle.
it all somehow tied up by the end of the book. Like there was like even though they did the NWA, I think, junior heavyweight titles, kind of the lineage of that was going on throughout the book, title changes and everything as well.
Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and where can everyone find your work, your other writing work, and you on social media as well?
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Vincent Berry. You can find me on Twitter, Wrestle_Ville. And let's see, you want to contact me by email, WrestlevilleUSA@gmail.com. And my other work, I don't know if those websites are still in existence.
I was going to talk about Wrestleville.com.
Oh, that's Wrestleville.com. Yeah, you can find all my writing and podcasts at Wrestleville.com.
Yeah, certainly a lot of great articles in there. One recently I read, Thunder Rosa. That was very cool, reading about her unsanctioned match against Britt Baker, and starting was it Mission Pro Wrestling?
Right. Yeah, and then she talks about the girls and some of the talent that she's working with, and yeah, they've got a really good thing going on in Mission Pro, and I've had the opportunity to see one of their shows, and it's outstanding.
I can only imagine with the talent she possesses, and she's really blown up in the last year or so. Like when the NWA presented her at the way they did, and then all the way up to AEW, it's been quite impressive.
I discovered her when she first, I've been watching her when she first hit the scene, and I've seen a lot of growth in her, and she has really been through it, man. I mean, she's been grinding it out, and she's a superstar, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I was blown away. Like I think it was the first time they started doing NWA Power on YouTube before the pandemic, and I was like, they were kind of teasing her for a while, and then they presented her. I'm like, this woman's a star. Like she had it. It was,
oh yeah,
you could just tell she had it from the get-go.
She's had it for a long time.
Yep, that's for sure. But thank you again for joining me on the show, Vinny, today. I really appreciate your time. It had a whole lot of fun talking about your books, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.